This is Jack Donovan, and you are listening to or watching Pater, the Journal of Solar Culture, PH2T3R. And I'm here with my co-host, C.B. Robertson, author of many fine books. You can find them in the show notes. And we're definitely not sponsored by Monster Ultra.
So we should be.
The pineapple pick me up. But today's show is about authenticity. We had, first of all, let me say we started a new Discord group. And if you click on I believe there's a link in the show notes to this, or on the link in our bio on our The Order of Fire's Instagram page. We just fired up a Discord for all of our readers, followers, listeners, viewers, whatever you want to call it, so that they could we can interact with them more and get more involved. People who are interested in the Order of Fire and solar idealism. So you click on that, sign up for the mailing list. That's what you have to give us to get the link to the Discord. Hopefully, I'm going to be coming out with a whole bunch of cool merch this summer. I actually just have to get enough out of my schedule so I can design it or pay someone to design it. But that's kind of the goal for where we're going. But in terms of authenticity, to start, there's so many different ways we could go with what is authenticity, and you see it so much. And it's I had a couple comments. One of our former members and a good guy, Corey, he commented on our Instagram page that it's just been totally ruined by Austin style influencers of like you have to be more authentic, man. And what does that even mean? And the people, they're probably the fakest people that you could imagine who are saying you have to be more authentic. And to that point, when I think of authenticity now, I think of this crazy mind fuck that I had, as flipping through Instagram a year or two ago, maybe 3, and those master classes, which some of them will actually look really good. They're like someone really famous teaching you directing, or they're giving you a speech about it, and so there was a master class on authenticity, and it was being taught by RuPaul, the drag queen. And is there anything more insane than that? Like your authenticity is a persona. Like you're a character that you created, which is a weird thing. I have a strange connection to that because when I was interning for a designer in the East Village, when I was going to school for fashion design, they actually made a costume for RuPaul, and RuPaul actually came in. So I've met RuPaul as a bald black guy. So like many years ago, it would have been 30 years ago. So dude's got to be like my age or older. But yeah, so it's just a weird connection. I was like, really? That's who's teaching authenticity? That's amazing. And what does that even mean? If to be your true self, you're putting on tons of makeup and pretending to be a character that you made up, who is the opposite sex from what you actually are. What is that? What does that mean? That is your true self. How could that be? So I don't know. What are your thoughts on authenticity generally? We can go 1,000 directions. We'll try and go as many as possible. But what do you think? What do you
to me, what immediately comes to mind hearing RuPaul advanced as as some kind of model for authenticity, like on its face, it's hilarious. But there was an interesting dichotomy in the world of philosophy, between what might be pejoratively called the essentialists, and on the other hand, the existentialists. And the two positions are summarized as the essentialists believe that there is an essence to things and to a human being. What is it? There's an essence of what it means to be a man. So being authentic means being true to form and true to that essential form. The existentialists, mainly Jean-Paul Sartre, and a few others, say no. Existence precedes essence. We exist in the world prior to some sort of kind of Platonic forms, and we create forms in our minds in order to make sense of the world. But the forms aren't more real or more true than our existence, and our existence precedes these forms and these essences. And so in the Sartre existentialist view, we are radical individuals. And so authenticity means embracing that freedom, the nausea of that freedom, and following your will and your feelings, essentially, even against what other people would say are normal forms, like your sex or your species, or what have you.
Your species, yeah.
You can take it pretty far these days.
If you backed it up a bit, I would say both are true. From
right.
the way you explain them, both are true. I mean, I think that do we make forms of things to make the world make sense of the world? Of course. I mean, that's kind of the main principle of solar idealism. But the men make these forms to express what they already are, which is also part of them. Like I've often been described as a masculine essentialist by critics and so forth, and it
has a kind of pejorative sound to it, doesn't it?
Yeah. Like
it's not wrong,
it sounds like when we talk about Gnosticism or something, like to them it sounds like oh, you're an essentialist. Like oh you believe in imaginary forms.
Unsophisticated.
Isn't that clever, you country hillbilly? But you must have gone to school at somewhere that wasn't expensive. But but
back in middle-aged Platonists, aren't you?
Yeah. So but yeah, I mean, I obviously I'm very much there are recurring forms in humanity, and there are obviously that things keep coming back around again. Now they become very different. I mean, that's kind of the whole theory of archetypes too. I mean, they're recurring forms that become dreams over and over again, that become like part of our existence, and we keep seeing them, and they're just patterns. It's like pattern recognition, and so. I think we exist in the world without them, but they're going to exist too, because we're going to see the same patterns.
Well, and the patterns exist prior to our existence without being named. I mean, there was I think one of the most fascinating comments sort of on this subject peripherally, at least as it pertains to gender, came from Brett Weinstein, of all people, who was talking about how there are certain qualities of gender or sex. James Lindy's been big on it's not gender, it's sex, but like on sex, on male and female, that seem to transcend not just human beings, not just mammals, but animals. Like the certain character qualities of the male of a life form, and again, it doesn't even have to be animals necessarily, and the female of a life form, there seem to be certain qualities that are so universal that they seem to be, they appear as if they are like laws of the universe almost. And you get, when a biologist talks about finding these patterns in, like, you know, multi-cell microscopic organisms, and not just in complex mammals like ourselves, the idea that it's all socially constructed and therefore a constraint upon our authenticity seems to sound like a stretch or wishful thinking, perhaps. And the fact that we can construct things doesn't mean that there aren't essential truths about what we are that precede our mind.
Right. And obviously there are, things that, go with being a mammal, as we've
Right.
discussed before. And those patterns are going to be closer to where to that pattern that we are as a primate. There are certain things that are going to be closer to the pattern that we recognize as male for that. It might get a little weirder if you get into birds or other things, but as we've said, all these things follow from biology and what makes the most sense. Obviously, like, okay, there's the gestation period of an animal, and well, what do you do with the males? And a lot of the things that are characteristics of males follow from that simple thing. This one needs to be down for 9 months or whatever, and or it'd be vulnerable. This one can go out and do other stuff. We can experiment with that one a little bit more. And also, the obvious, the reproductive things of like X amount of eggs, X amount of sperm, things like that. I mean, just they follow naturally from that, logically.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that's been, but to take it away from gender, because we could go down that whole sex and all that. But
because authenticity is not really a matter of biology. We're talking about kind of an experience. Like, are we, because animals don't experience authenticity, we assume anyways. They just are.
They already have it. Yeah.
They already have it.
They already have it. They're like, what is an animal faking? Well, I said, sometimes my dogs fake things, I think, but or they appear to be faking things, but
an octopus isn't violating its essential nature when it pretends to be a fish that it's not, or things like that.
Right. Exactly. That is part of its nature to do that. And I don't think that, obviously, we don't have any argument or really anything to investigate on to whether men and women are the same. Because I feel like we're all on the same page about that, and not really arguing at that point. But I guess more important is, how important is authenticity if we can define it, and how do we live more authentically as men? It would be the more like useful discussion to have for our audience, right? In terms of like, what can we, how do we be more authentic? And I asked X about this a few minutes ago. I meant to do it hours ago, but one of the guys said authenticity was being the same person with people around as when they aren't around. And I was like, well, I like that, but we are social animals, and I wrote this in the description as I was thinking about this morning. And we do have, part of our nature is to adapt to different social situations. Right. So we do become slightly different people. The thing that came to mind right away was boyfriend voice. People have talked about there being boyfriend voice and your regular voice. And I mean, I don't know how, but I'm sure the manosphere would have a whole bunch of opinions on whether that's real or not. But the way you talk to your spouse when no one else is around might be a little bit different than the way you talk to me or whatever. I mean, it's like there's different tones. We have tonality with our voices that we can change, and different language that we use for different situations. And the same way that I talk different to my dogs than I talk to you.
Right.
If I talk to my dog to you like I talk to my dog, it would be pretty rude.
Yeah. Well, and like we are multi-dimensional animals. Like we're gifted with this big prefrontal cortex that's designed to adapt. Yeah. There would be something like, I like the spirit of the answer, that you are the same person from moment to moment, that like it's capturing this concept of congruity, I suppose. But like, if you talked to your spouse and to your children the same way that you talk to your employees and the same way that you talk to people on the street versus your, elderly grandparents, like that would be very maladaptive. Like they would be putting principles ahead of functionality in this very ideologically misguided kind of way. And I think that's one of the dangers of words like authenticity, is that it can lead, especially young men in their early 20s, onto like very romantic notions of what is good and pure, to the detriment not only of themselves but to other people around them. And I think authenticity is one of those things. Like, to start with, in an age of social media, one of the most, I guess, important dichotomies to think about is like, there's the authenticity that we experience in other people. Like, does this person outside of me strike me as an authentic individual?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a different kind of authenticity than the authenticity we feel in ourselves when we're acting fake or doing something that maybe does feel congruent or not congruent with who we want to be and what our self-conception is. So like authenticity can cut in external experience or an internal experience. And I think those things are different, because sometimes being authentic might mean acting in a way that other people say looks not authentic, and just being okay with that.
Yeah, well, in the faking it to make it kind of way, in terms of like you have to try things. You have to try things to figure out who you are, or to figure out what works and what doesn't work, and you have to experiment. And I always say that be yourself is a terrible device. Just be yourself. I mean, that's baseline, because what that really signals to a lot of people is that they should be whoever they were in high school, or that they should be everything beyond that is putting on airs, and you really like I should be who my mom thinks I am.
Yeah.
Because that's who you really are, and everything after that is fake. But that's just her perception of who I was at that time. You know, so I mean, that's the same thing. It's like, well, people who knew you when you were younger think you're not being authentic if you've evolved. Because that's not how he really is. I know how he really is. People who talk like that. Like that, and they say that about celebrities. They say that about all kinds of people who I knew that guy in college or elementary school or whatever, and so that's not who he really is. It's like, he's not learned anything or evolved in the past 30 years.
Yeah. How he was 10 years ago actually negates his persistent character today. That's not what he does is not really who he is because of something he did before.
Exactly. I've had internet trolls pop out who maybe were at a party with me in 2006 and be like, I know how he really is. I'm like, Jesus, I'm not anything like I was in 2006, but there's some things the same, but not a lot. It's an interesting thing that people like to keep you in a certain spot. I think one of the things with authenticity, one of the themes of it that I think is relevant is that, you do what you, the ideal of authenticity is really to be who you say you are. I think more than anything else, I wouldn't say, well, let's not make a big statement about that. But I think that being authentic means to most people, and I think to me, it's like, well, I'm not saying one thing and doing the exact opposite of it. But when you get to the point where people are saying one thing and doing the other, the further those get apart, the less authentic you seem to be.
Yeah.
Like if for instance, if you're a you're super Christian Jesus guy, but you're banging hookers on the side, and you're telling other people not to, that makes you look like a hypocrite, but also it just makes you look like you don't even believe the things that you're saying. You're not living in the way that you're telling other people to live. And that could apply to a lot of things. That's just one, an easy example. But if I think that the people who we think are really authentic are people who are like, oh, well, that's who they said they were, like, online. And then I met them and they seemed pretty much the same, like they are that guy, like they're going to be, everybody's going to be a little bit different. I'm funnier in real life, but I think if it seems the same, and there are a lot of people who that they are literally just playing a character online, and then you meet them, whatever, and you're like, oh, they're playing a character. That's not real, And so that's I think a real measure of authenticity that I think is valid. Another one that I have, because I think about this a lot, because I try to be authentic as much as I can, because people do meet me in real life and then they judge me, and I try to carry those things through and be who I say I am. And I also, you can't be responsible for what people make up about you in their head, but you can be responsible for things that come out of your mouth, and that those things match. One of the things that is different between men and women in that men are expected to be more authentic in many ways is that I've had it come up a bunch of times in terms of photography. You can, as a woman, you can literally do any damn thing in a photograph, and as long as you look hot, no one cares. Oh, I'm blowing bubbles while shooting an AK-47. Try doing that and being a dude and see whatever.
Matt can do that, and literally no one else.
Yeah. Men will just be like, "What are you doing? Why would you do that? That makes no sense." There's an authenticity problem. I won't pose with a weapon that I cannot wield. Because there's an authenticity problem, unless you're an actor or you're in a band. In those two scenarios, men are allowed to do any damn thing. But if you're an actor, because that's the role of an actor, is to pretend to be authentic, and then if you're in a band, you're enacting a fantasy on stage, and so that's okay. Or in some kind of theatrical role like that. But in real life, it's like I can't go on Instagram and hold a sword. I mean, in anything but jest. I had some guy try to put a trench knife in my hand for a photo shoot, and I was like, I can't do this. This is ridiculous. Why would I have a trench knife? There's no reason for me to have a trench knife. But that was the shoot, and I could, if I really wanted to entertain people, I don't have it handy, so I can't do it. But that was the shoot where I was invited to take pictures out in the wood, but with this photographer that I liked, but the whole thing got derailed, and I ended up with a whole bunch of strippers from Portland, who like ugly hipster strippers. It wasn't even cool. They were just kind of dirty, naked girls. And so I end up in the woods with these two photographers, and the one photographer was the one who got me and was following me online. But I just ended up I had just come back from Mount Zion. I was jacked and lean and tan, so tan. And I ended up being Fabio for the afternoon, and just because I was like, well, if they had any idea who I was, they'd be horrified. But okay, well, I'll put one of these naked girls up on my shoulder, and while she blows bubbles and whatever. So, and I have this whole collection of these pictures that are ridiculous. But he wanted to take pictures of me too, but I'm like, I'm not gonna fake crying in the ground or do whatever weird dramatic stuff that you want me to do, because it makes me look silly, and I'm an actual serious person.
Crying in the ground would be weird, but I mean, you do have that one photo that involves the floaty pool toy.
Yes,
that you put out. I'd like to, and a lot of your photography is this very, very serious artistic vibe.
Yeah,
but anyone who has just read your writing or seen your photography but hasn't met you in person might come away with a false impression that you're an extremely German serious kind of person, and not this a dude who like just goofs around the way that other dudes goof, like just like other guys. Like we have senses of humor. We do funny shit too. And like it's tricky because you can't capture everything about someone in a photograph, but you can at least not, as Jordan Peterson would say, you can at least not lie.
Yeah, and this brought up something that we came up in jiu-jitsu the other day. I made my my professor laugh because we were talking about there's all these jiu-jitsu characters now that like they'll show you their moves that they're doing, and because that's what I do. I'm addicted to it too. If I scroll Instagram, I'm like, oh, that was cool. I want to try that. Oh, that's cool. I want to try that. That's cool. And you just look at these moves. I'm like, I think I could do that. They're working in my game. And you just find all this stuff and you're like looking at for techniques constantly. And so the guys who do it a lot start to come up with like little like gestures that they do that are like their signature gestures. And so like there's one, it goes by like Ragnar or something. He usually gives good stuff. And at the end, he has this cool haircut. He's always like, at the end, whatever. And that's his thing. But there's this one that as soon as I brought it up, everybody in the room, because we're all jiu-jitsu people, knew exactly what I was talking about. There's this guy who has a bunch of tattoos, and he's always like, he's like doing a little vaudeville show or something. He's showing you the move, but he's like, and like fake laughing the whole time. And we're just like, I'm a fake laugh. Fuck that guy. And my professor knew exactly what I was talking about as I brought it up. He's like, I fucking hate him. And the whole room just erupted with all these guys like, fucking hate that guy and his fake laughter. So I sent my professor a note as I got back. Like I went home and blocked him just on general principle, so I never had to see that again. but that was what I said while we were talking about it was like, men shouldn't do fake laughter. Like that, like fake laughter is vile. I mean, it's kind of gross on anyone. Like, oh, you're not really amused, you're just pretending to be amused. Oh, that's it's insulting, And so, but this kind of like,
well, it's uncanny too. Yeah.
Behavior, like I'm being silly, like that's
I feel like another word for fake is inauthentic.
Yeah,
if you say inauthentic laughter, and it's gross. But even when it's not actively grossing you out, it has a very kind of creepy, uncanny feeling to it. I think as well.
Well, what's the Venn diagram between sincerity and authenticity? I mean, it sounds pretty heavy because that's what really, we could have done sincere laughter and you would have said the same thing. Authentic laughter is sincere laughter. Like, I'm really amused. Yeah. I'm really laughing right now. Not like I'm pretending to laugh to look cute. Like, and right. So like that's sincere. So it's very, I think there's a lot of, in a lot of gestures like that, I think authenticity and sincerity would be essentially the same thing.
Yeah. And bringing it into the world of practicality, a lot of people got into the men's movement for want of dating advice and how to deal with women and so forth. And one of the questions that plagues these guys is, what do you do with the allegation of being creepy? There's this thing where women will say, oh, that guy's creepy. And it's very hard to pinpoint what it is. Some people will say, oh, it just means she doesn't find him attractive. If a hot guy did it, it would be hot. But if an ugly guy did it, it's creepy. Yeah. And there's like a degree of truth to that.
Yeah.
But a lot of times that's sour grapes. And a lot of times what creepy means when a woman says a guy is creepy is there's something inauthentic and insincere about it. There's false pretenses of being a gentleman or oh, we're just friends until months later he'll confess his love for the girl. There's a type of guy who will tend to do this, who is taught to essentially be insincere with women. And he says, this one commentator said, if you look at a woman directly making eye contact, that's not creepy. What's creepy is the like kind of constantly going forward and back. If you're just direct to say, acknowledge the girl or woman and say, like, hey, I'm interested in you. What's your name? That might be a little forward, but no woman is going to, very few women, I should say, are going to say that's creepy necessarily.
Okay.
But there's a game that some guys will play in trying to avoid being rejected, where they'll not quite be forward, and they'll not, they'll try to pretend to be something that they're not, and they'll try to pretend that they're feeling a way that they're not actually feeling. And there's an energy almost of incongruity that guys, I think, can learn to pick up. It's very obvious with certain marketing types, but in person sometimes it's harder. But women are very, very good at picking that up, I think. And this seems to be a trend, and guys learning to be congruent can be valuable in that dating world as well. But also, guys don't like it either. We may not have quite the radar systems that women have, but when you hear someone, even if it isn't obvious that they're pretending to be someone that they're not, if you see someone on social media who is constantly posting things like they just posted an Instagram picture of their watch and it's 4:30 in the morning. and they're posting like pictures of themselves with like quotes, so like, I will carry the boats, or just other like really, really lame caricatures of other people's stuff. They might actually mean that sincerely. And it might be aspirational, but it still comes across as extremely inauthentic and try hard. And like, dude, just stop.
Yeah, like that's your self-talk. Keep it inside. Like if they're posting it, it might be their self-talk. They might be trying to get kudos from other guys who like that and think it's cool. It's hard to read stuff like that. But yeah, obviously, I mean that's a thing that like. I guess that plays into inauthenticity too, in the way that especially younger people but a lot of people, but especially younger people have been coached to what gets likes and shares and what they think they're supposed to say on social media. I mean, I think it used to be like people would get on and maybe overshare and say too much about what they were actually thinking. And that creates problems too. But there's also, and people overshare, the worst is like, I don't see this a lot because it's kind of a Facebook thing, but people oversharing about their relationships and their breakups and stuff. That's pretty rough. Like stuff that should never be said in public, it gets out in public a lot. But
and that's authentic, but maybe you shouldn't share it.
Yeah, maybe that's a time for inauthenticity. like I've got it under control. It's not a problem.
Well, this is the appeal, I think, that was leveraged with another big therapy word, which is vulnerability. Because vulnerability, in a sense, is inauthenticity, or is authenticity, and invulnerability is inauthentic. The projection of invincibility is literally not true, obviously.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you should present your underbelly to the world.
Right.
This
is like one of my big triggers. Like vulnerability, like you should just be more vulnerable, man. That means weakness. Don't you understand what that means?
Well, and some people even to there's like Kafka layers to the bullshittery here. There are people who will literally project a false face of vulnerability.
Yes.
Which is like that now you're straight like Patrick Bateman sociopath at that point. But and this is why I think it's interesting to think about the difference between how authentic someone else looks, which can be valuable to think about from like a marketing angle. Like, how do I want to present myself and how will this appearance affect other people? How will they feel? Will this look authentic or not? But never forgetting the goal is a feeling of authenticity in yourself. Because I feel like many of the men who talk about being vulnerable now, or really, really in the last 10 years, basically got that struggle session out of them by feminists and counselors who did like an intervention style circle and talked about vulnerability and the importance of it, and like basically chastised them for being defensive or whatever other keyword they are going to use to attack someone's integrity, and then reward them, I love bomb them if they open up and present vulnerability. And so now they become emotionally attached to this thing. And it's like,
yeah. Or it could just be, it didn't have to be a struggle session. It could be like one chick, like one chick that they dated who like had absorbed a lot of that. And then they got rewarded for that behavior. Like, told that that's how they're supposed to behave. It's like same thing. It's like, I always like, is that your girlfriend talking or is that you? Like, like that's, you see that a lot. And also there's
which is not to say that being changed by your partner isn't possible, and you can change in a positive way, and that can also be authentic. But
sure.
I was doing a little bit of reading before we started talking. I already mentioned existentialism and Jean-Paul Sartre, but I think the best philosopher who wrote on this, who we already talked about in previous shows, is Martin Heidegger. And the German word he uses to talk about authenticity is, I'm probably going to butcher the German, but it's Eigentlichkeit, which means essentially owning oneself.
Okay.
Owning yourself, owning your actions. And he was trying to capture his conception of life was as a relationship with ourselves. So we have a kind of essence, but we don't necessarily have access to that essence. And we're also always changing. We're in different environments, and so forth. And we have a relationship with our environment. And the experience of this change over time is Dasein, is being there. And what is our relationship with this experience? Are we going to just express that directly and honestly and confront it, face and own our experience? Or are we going to take cover behind what someone else tells us is the right thing to do or imitate someone else's model? I think there's a huge difference when it comes to this experience of authenticity between taking someone's modeling, someone else as inspiration, to like, I'm going to take a little bit of that. This seems like a good thing to learn from and borrow from, versus taking someone else who is in a different context than you and who is a different person than you as a model to become.
Right.
And like, it's a very subtle difference, but it's like that you can be inspired by Jocko Willink without, doing the watch photos or trying to become him. I think it comes down to, are you taking responsibility for and ownership of your actions, or the photographs that you put out into the world, or the things that you write down, and so forth.
Actually, this dovetails really well into what I just remember, because we talked about all the things we could possibly bring up. And the one that was in your wheelhouse recently was about podcasts and learning and authentic learning. And
yes,
authentic learning versus performative learning, or like just thinking you're going to learn by osmosis and reception. And basically the point he was making, and then he can re-summarize it and reframe it if he wants, is that Chris was talking to me about the way that people listen to podcasts now. Like a lot of young men especially, but a lot of people just generally listen to podcasts and learn passively. But they're not really learning. They're learning what that guy said. So they're learning from like a secondary source who he's interpreted the information. He's reinterpreting that information for you. And so you're learning his interpretation of that information. And so that may or may not, you haven't really done the work.
Yeah.
You're just learning what to say. And that can be a valuable thing for things that I don't care to do the work on. There's things that I really care about and that I'm going to go down the rabbit hole with. And if I just want to know a vague idea of what's going on in the world with this or the other thing, I'm not going to do the like ground level reporting of it myself. I'm going to listen to a few people, see what they have to say, and I'll like kind of get an informed opinion based on that. People who I trust. The same thing with just basic information, like health information, like workout stuff. Like I'm going to compare it. Well, I would say actually I have a long time of actually doing stuff in real life experience to add to that. So that's probably a bad example. But maybe with supplements or something like that. Like, what does this guy say that this does? Oh, okay. I'm not going to do the science. I'm not going to sit and research like, oh, well, what does that actually do to the cells? Because I don't care. Like, I'm like, does it work? like, I don't have time for that. That's not my specialty. No one cares what I have to say about that. So I'm not a good source for you. If I say, well, what that does to your cells, why would you believe me? I'm right about these issues. That's not, I'm not a biologist. So I think that people get this sense that they know things, as you were saying, because they've listened to people say things. The perfect example that we all know is Huberman.
God, yeah.
And now they know all about what the sun does to your eyes. And that's the most famous one. He gets like the most shit for, I think. But tons of things, which we've cited Huberman in discussions that we've had before. And there's lots of very smart things. And he's a very smart guy. And he's probably right about a lot of things. But I cited him in our meditation video for the Order of Fire. But like, I don't. Well, I don't know at the same level that he does.
You don't become Huberman because you listened to Huberman, and you don't know everything that he knows about the effect of nicotine on the body, or the sleep, or whatever else he's talking about on a given day, because you listened to a 2-hour podcast. And I'm speaking from experience here a little bit. The problem with listening to podcasts and stuff is that you are almost always multitasking. You're driving, you're working, you're doing dishes, you're working out, you're doing something else, and you feel like you're being ultra productive because you're multitasking. But that actually reduces your ability to focus, not just to focus on, but to think critically about, and to think what you're taking in. Like if you listen to, there's no reason an Andrew Huberman podcast couldn't be very educational, but the way you would do that is you would listen to the podcast closely, and you'd be sitting down at a desk, like just drinking a cup of coffee or something and listening or watching, and you would take notes and you would write down the studies he's talking about. And then maybe you'd listen to it again, and then you'd actually go and read some of those studies and be like, and then that leads to this other study, which he didn't mention, but was another take on the subject that maybe counters what he was talking about. And then you can compare this notes and actually to get involved in it. I think a wonderful example of someone doing this is James Lindsay. Mm-hmm. His whole deep dive into Marxism that he's been going down for the last 3 years began with him reading one book by one guy that had a bunch of footnotes and a bunch of references. And he says every time he'd hit one of those footnotes that references some book, he would put that book down, go buy that other book, and he'd read that book. And he would read it out loud and make a podcast about it, about his take on that. And he'd periodically go back to the source book as he works through all of and he's coming to his own conclusions and making these chains and jumps. And you come through the other side, having gone through that active, as Heidegger was talking about, you're having a relationship with the experience of the material. Mm-hmm. You're not just a passive recipient of it where you are elated with the feeling of learning things. You have these profound, that makes sense. Wow, I never thought of it that way. And then 3 weeks later, you're like, oh man, this one guy said this really cool, what was it? And there's no, it was just a feeling, there's no strong connections, and beyond just not being able to remember it, you almost certainly didn't implement it into your life. Now, if you are implementing these changes, if you listen to Andrew Huberman's podcast on vision, and you're like, wow, he makes a really compelling case. I'm going to make sure I get 15 minutes a day out in blue natural sunlight, or 30 minutes in cloudy weather. And you actually make that, you learn something, like by definition.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you've actually gone, like you said, and done the actual resource, something we do on the show a lot is obviously we talk about books. And if someone cites your, with authority, if they cite your summary of Heidegger as their opinion on Heidegger, they don't know anything about Heidegger. Because you're just a guy who said a thing, and because you've engaged with the material, so you've developed an opinion on it, and that's an active engagement.
And but by the way, I've engaged with Heidegger way less than I should have.
Yeah. But I mean,
I'm still learning.
It came out of my head. But same thing like Nietzsche. Like, Jack said that Nietzsche really meant this or whatever. Like, you don't know. Did you read Zarathustra? Like, you might have a different take. You read all the different translations and all the different writing about that. There's all kinds of schools of thought on what people think about that. And this is just my take. And you may like my take, but your take is more intelligent if you actually sit down and read Zarathustra and engage with the primary material. We're saying the same thing about the ancient Greek material. There's primary text. If you're listening to this is what someone tell you what the ancient Greeks believed about this, and this, and you can literally go to the actual text the only remaining things that we have. And sure, you can use some of that as a guide, but the words are there. Look them up. Look them up, see what makes sense to you. Because, like I said, over this year, I was listening to Camille Paglia and Nietzsche's take on Apollo, until I went and literally cataloged everything I could find that Apollo actually came out of his mouth, or that he did in literature from that period. And I'm like, well, that doesn't feel like him at all. That's not my take on Apollo at all. And but I was saying what was Apollonian based on what they had said what was Apollonian, my experience of it and personally. So one thing we brought up, and I think there's, you may remember the book. I'm losing it off the top of my head. I'm old. I forget things. But that guy who, Mortimer Adler, wrote How to Read a Book. And I think he was the one who talked about like master's level engagement with material versus, like kind of bachelor engagement with material versus like PhD level. When you're doing master's level work, you are actually like going through the notes, and doing the actually engaging with material and reading it several times and like going back through it and actually doing more than just, you're writing about it at that point. You're not just like reading it, you're writing about it. And engaging with and taking this active relationship with text, and that's when you become you have a level of expertise with something. Right, it's when you're actually doing that work and figure out, well, what did he say there? Well, what did that really mean? And then like stop to think about it. Versus like, say, for instance, very popular audiobooks. Like there's an audiobook. Okay, you're listening to that right through, and you got a vibe off of it, of what this person said. But if there's a different level, if you're going to go write an essay about what the person said, you probably need the actual text, and you need to go back through it and actually see word for word what they said, rather than just rewinding the audiobook over and over again. There needs to be some kind of level of engagement there.
One of my more enjoyable deep dives of the last several months was in the order we were going through some of Plato's dialogues, including the trial and death of Socrates. And I was doing the audiobook thing because I was working a lot, but part of my audio exploration was I found a guy who was going through the Apology in Greek, and he was translating it, and he was explaining why he was translating certain things the way he was, and how he translated it. And that was where I found the emphasis on the ateknos word, and the juxtaposition of that with, I forget what the Greek word was, but the root was cosmos, and it was referring to the way in which Socrates' accusers would order and construct their arguments in an ornamented fashion. And you find these little bits when you look at the text through multiple angles like that. And it is better to do that in text. I sincerely believe audio was kind of a backup that I had to do, but that's where you begin to develop that relationship with the text. And you can just do it through repetition, but like you can't get there usually with just one read through of a book.
Well, from what we have said in the past, and I only know this through you, so I only know it secondhand information. But wouldn't Socrates be the one who would argue against going to the text?
Well,
yes. He hated the idea of going to text, right?
So the message didn't stick with Plato. So
yeah. I just thought it was funny as you were saying that. I'm like, hey, wait, didn't he say we shouldn't use text?
Yeah.
But why don't you? I think the screen is a little too far away from my eyes for me to read it right now. But I think we have a good question. It looks like a good question.
Alvis asks, what if you copy a favorite role model, and when you've learned as much of that one man, you then dissolve the copying and make it your own by twisting it, for you can understand their way. So yeah, you can completely copy someone's style as like a phase and then come out of that but without completely shedding the good parts from them. So I can speak kind of from personal experience that I went through a very strong Christopher Hitchens fanboy phase. Currently I hold almost no shared opinions with him anymore. Not on the Iraq War, not on religion, not even exactly on free speech. There's a lot of overlap, but there's very important subtle differences. But it was still a very positive period of learning and development. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think you just have to bear in mind that if you're going to do that, and if you're going to do that in a very public facing way, then the people who see you do that, who you present yourself doing this to, are going to be really put off. Maybe you're okay with that. Maybe you own that process. That's fine. That would be authentic, according to Heidegger, as long as you are taking responsibility and ownership of your action and not just it sounds like a paradox. There's a whole category of things that sound like paradoxes, but are in fact not. They're not contradictions at all. We talked before about the importance of not like trusting experts and deferring your own responsibility for choosing to outside sources. But if I use my judgment and say, I think this person is a good source to trust, so I will take their opinion on that, you've just owned that. And the subtle difference emerges when the decision winds up being wrong. Do you blame that person for having misled you, or do you say, oh, okay, I was wrong to trust them on this thing? And do you take responsibility when the outcome isn't what you expected? There's sort of a retrospective gauge of how much ownership you're actually taking. And this is all kind of internal. You can't judge this in any kind of, can't use objective metrics to measure this exactly, but you can kind of, I think people can have a feeling about it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Because we all have to trust somebody else's opinion about something, because we can't all do the individual research on, how magnets work or whatever,
or gravity.
Or I mean, we can't do all the original research that led to the current state of human knowledge. And so we have to trust people's opinions. Like a perfect example, as you were saying that, Ajak, Alexander Cortez. He's someone who I know personally. I've met him several times. We've hung out and had dinner and all kinds of stuff. And he is I've watched him over the years. He will actually revise his opinions if he thinks, oh, I found better information. I was wrong about this thing. And he generally gives advice in terms of health and exercise that I think is consistent with what is reality. He's not just trying to sell some like people make up things in that industry and try and like, well, I have the new secret. And
is it whiskey and deadlifts, or is it sunning your butt?
We'll keep that inside but there's so many things like that. That was my first exposure to that. But yeah, no, there's a lot of people who do that, and I tend to trust his judgment and his information. So like recently, there was this stuff going around, methylene blue, which is this basically a chemical dye that people are just like dropping into their mouths, and it supposedly like helps all these things, which I don't care about the details of any of them. I'm like, okay, sure, it says it does a lot of stuff, but he said that he got some. He said that he tried it and that he liked it, and so I was like, all right, I'll give that a shot. I mean, I'm not going to die. So yeah, I'll try some, see what it is. And I think I feel about the same thing. Like, I feel like I'm like, oh, this is, most supplements are say plus 5%, they make you feel a little bit better about something. And how much of that is placebo effect is even arguable. But I wasn't really like hooked on like, this is the thing. So I was just like, let me try this, see if I feel anything, like that was kind of my vibe to it. And so I gave it a shot. And I made he got my magnets joke. But magnets, how do they work? Insane clown posse.
Earth, water, fire, dirt.
But yeah, so I deferred that judgment, but I wouldn't have been like, I mean, that is I'm acknowledging that I deferred that judgment to him, and I'll give it a shot. And I'm not going to be like, nothing happened, I spent my $70, and because it's like, well, he said his recommendation was even reasonable.
Yeah.
Whereas I saw another thing, because I was researching someone else the other day, and they're obviously involved with someone who's producing honey and selling honey, and they're making the most ridiculous claims about honey. Now, honey is probably good for you. I would say that it's not a bad thing. It's probably better for you than cane sugar. There's a lot of good things about honey, but they're like, honey is the single most amazing thing that you could ever put in your body. Okay, that's bullshit. Like, you just
obviously
you are selling bullshit, and so like, shut up.
Yeah,
like that's inauthentic to me, because like, you don't actually believe that, and if you do, then you're dumb.
Yeah, there's almost there's almost a form of inauthentic writing or video content, where you can almost begin to detect sales copy, even if everything described is factually accurate.
Right.
It can give an uncanny feeling. It's like something feels off about it, even if you can't point to any one part and say that's factually wrong. And because people can be manipulated with the truth, or with true facts, I should say. There's to me there's inauthentic in people who are just knowingly saying bullshit, and then there's like the experience of inauthenticity that is, first of all, it's important. I think it's undervalued by men in judging other people around you. But it's important to be cognizant of when writing as well. And maybe this comes from my wife being a copywriter, so I see a lot of copywriting and the funnel writing, the emails that people send out. And I've been parts of some of these email subscriber lists, and all the emails look the same. They all have the same kind of writing. And now whenever I see that kind of writing anywhere, I'm like, I don't want anything to do with that. And they might be giving me exactly what I need or want, but I still don't want. And if I detect anything like that kind of writing that voice in my own writing, I want to set myself on fire. Like, I don't want to sound like which is trendy lately.
Style.
Yeah. Speaking of inauthenticity,
It really is my favorite form of protest. I mean,
it's such a.
I mean, you got to
first time
it's
authentic. First time it's authentic.
Yeah.
Is it authentic if you're imitating a Buddhist monk?
I think anytime you set yourself on fire, I think that you're serious.
Yeah, we should give him that.
You may be stupid, but you're sincere because you're gonna die, and it's gonna be painful. That's. I think that's an authentic act. I mean, obviously, it's inspired by that, but does everybody who commits seppuku just copying?
I was making a joke. I wasn't meaning to.
Well, it's an interesting thing. Like, what's the most authentic means of suicide? That's it's a topic.
Well, and to say it's not authentic because someone else did it before, that's like a radical. To go back to our dichotomy from before, kind of a radical existentialist view. It's like you have to be purely individualistic. And I think that would be, if you follow that line of logic far enough and consistently enough, that's how you would end up with people like RuPaul as models of authenticity.
Well, yeah. And also, if you're going to try and only do things that nobody else in history have done, you're going to have a hard time.
Yeah,
that's not a thing. You're going to be ridiculous because there's no way at that point you have to start doing literally. Someone asked us to talk about the creative process a little bit, and I think that I was thinking about it, and the creative process is a lot of, whether it's writing or whatever. It's all these raw materials, and you're making decisions. It's all decisions, and so you almost, to do something radically different that no one has done before, you almost have to start making choices based on the fact that they haven't been done before, rather than whether they're good. You'd have to be like, I can put these crazy things that don't make any sense together because no one has done it before. And oh, okay, you made a mess. Okay, you just put poop and ice cream together. Great, good job. like no one's done it before. Like poop flavored ice cream, guys. But that you have to do ridiculous things almost, because the things that work. And that's where you can get into aesthetic theory and all the other things. It's like, well, the things that work have a vibe to them, and you have to say consistent to certain things or they're off, and they don't connect with people anymore. So,
so there's like a tension between congruent with what is, but not imitating directly what has been done before. And I think at the end of the day, it's actually much easier to not just imitate other people than some people will make it sound, because we're not living in the same world as the people who did things in the past.
Yeah.
So we actually physically can't actually replicate it. But which also explains why trying to is a bad idea. But it's still not good to try to be someone else, but we can still learn from and imitate parts of them. And imitation is often a good way to, as Alvin Presley pointed out, it can be a good way to learn things.
Oh, absolutely. And let's be real. They always say that with writing, especially writing, I think is one point where it comes across art. All of that involves imitation of style.
Yeah. Mr. McTubis points out, but how many have tried to do what no one has done before? Is it really original to be unique?
For sure.
Right.
But as an artist, this is our next subject that we mentioned that we were going to bring up was AI. Because it's some of what it is doing, and I have only the most cursory understanding of what it actually does, but it's taking patterns that are persistent and repeating them to a certain degree. And there's certain things that work and certain things that don't, and you do them over again. But the way, when I use Midjourney to make images, say for this podcast, I'm feeding it styles from a handful of artists and a handful of like a vibe that they're getting. And that isn't that much different than what I would do if I was trying to make the art myself.
Mm.
Because what I would do is I would look at here are the 5 artists that I like, and they're doing a thing that I like that they're doing. And how can I meet in the middle with that? And what kind of brushstroke is they using? What kind of and I would do that as an artist myself. That's how I would create. So when they say that it's copying, it's kind of doing what humans do in the way it's just doing it really fast, which is depressing. But I've been looking, I really want a perfect eagle, an eagle that I can see in my mind, but would take me probably 3 weeks to draw and get the way I want it to. Now I could get it the way I want it to. And what I would do is I would look at the people who have the style that I want and try how to mimic their style in whatever way that I'm able to do it. And as close. Okay, well, what brush are they using? What I can find out what texture pack that they're using or whatever, and find all the details of that, and then get as close to it as I possibly can. And that's what I would do as an artist. And that's, as an artist, I think when you develop your own style, it's really a composite of several styles that you've tried to copy, and then you've synthesize something that is uniquely yours over time, but you started out trying to copy that guy's style. And the same thing we know with as writers, I think that I can vibe. If I'm reading Nietzsche, I'm writing like Nietzsche. I'll start to vibe that and just re-vibe it out. I should probably read Nietzsche every day. But I'll pick up that vibe and throw it out. And if I were reading Dune, I'd probably pick up a vibe from that and have it be a little bit like that. So we do that as humans. And so there's a little bit of, someone just put in the comments, emulate. And there is that. So doing that in say the way that you conduct yourself, or the way that you if you're saying certain catchphrase, I think when you're getting into saying certain catchphrases, you probably need to stop. If you're doing the what Andrew Tate G thing, and you're saying all the same catchphrases, and that's kind of maybe too far. But if you're I like the way that guy walks, and you try to walk more like that, eventually that's going to become your walk, because you don't actually have the same spine or the same legs or whatever. It's going to be your own walk.
Yeah.
But you are copying, and that's how we learn as humans. So I wouldn't say that comment is off at all in terms of we do that. It's just, I think the level to which you do it, if you're literally dressing up as somebody else and doing every single thing that they do, that becomes a little weird.
Who is that woman who ran the scam blood testing company? Do you know the one I'm talking about? She was a couple people labeled her the new Steve Jobs. She was this very young entrepreneur, and part of the reason she was labeled the new Steve Jobs is because she dressed like him. She actually wore the turtleneck and all this stuff. And then it came out that it was total scam that cost many of the people billions of dollars or whatever. But or not that much, millions of dollars, but the straight imitation of not just the speaking style, but literally the clothing style of this other CEO who looked the way he looked and dressed the way he dressed because he wasn't trying to imitate someone else. I don't know if we can say that necessarily, but that trying to be the other person is very it comes across as uncanny, and it should come across as uncanny. It should come across as a red flag, I think.
Well, that's like an imposter. God, that's an old name. Andrew Cunanan. There's all these society hustlers who are famous for. That's the guy. I'm pretty sure that's the guy who killed Gianni Versace. And he was just some gay guy who like got into like circles and pretended he had money and he didn't have any money, and was like, hustling. He was like hanging out, and all of a sudden he's like around people who are around Versace and whatever. And there's a lot of those guys. And there was also a pretty well watched, I don't know if famous, but there was a well watched documentary. I can't remember exactly what it was called. It was on Netflix for a while. We watched it. It was about this chick who did the exact same thing. Like she pretended that she was Polish or like from some European royalty or something, and like was actually like acting like a socialite in Manhattan, and to the point where she was getting banks to like loan her money for like and they turned her down. Like they were like, when's that money from your dad going to come through, whatever. But she was attracting investors for her high-end hotel that she was going to build. And she was like white trash. Like she had picked up an accent, and she just learned what those people do, which is actually pretty impressive. It's actually, coming off as someone who has always had money is actually kind of tricky. Like if you haven't grown up with money, coming off as if you have is pretty impressive.
Well, it's who's the Catch Me If You Can guy? The airline pilot / doctor / whatever else he pretended to be.
yeah. There's so many people who have done that like really successfully, and you kind of have to be a sociopath to like do anything.
To do it well.
Yeah. You have to just believe that you are that person, and it's okay that what you're doing, you're just fooling people, and that's fine.
Yeah. Well, and there is like a view that many people have that you have to imitate these other people in order to get anywhere. But it can be a useful thing to do, but I really don't think it's necessary. I think even if you aren't imitating any one person in particular, you can, if you just go far enough in a skill set, whether that's plumbing or copywriting or anything like that, and just draw things in to try to improve in small bits over time, you can reach a very good place where you're proud of what you have become and what you can do without ever having necessarily tried to become someone else. And where you're not becoming an actor who is pretending to be. There's a hilarious little comedy bit that was going around Instagram a few days ago of is it Ian McKellen, the actor who played Gandalf in Lord of the Rings?
Yeah.
He was explaining how was it that I became Gandalf? Well, I pretended to be a wizard. And when I was originally asked for the role, I had to explain, you realize I'm not actually a wizard, right? Yes. I want you to pretend to be the wizard, put your acting skills to it was this huge satirical spoof on like method acting, basically. Yeah. He's like, how did I know what to say? Because everything was written down for me. It's funny to think about, but so many people actually think they have to go through the actions and the behaviors of these successful people, whether it's Andrew Tate or whatever other sociopathic salesman is making the rounds on social media at the moment. And this is how you end up on selling Cutco knives on someone's doorstep. Basically, you're like, oh, I started from the bottom, so I'm going to do what they did. And it's like, that actually can be a path to success eventually. Oftentimes you learn by experience what not to do, and part of that was what you were emulating. But what works is a product of trial and error, and that process of imitation often isn't necessary to develop that skill, to develop yourself. You can actually just be there in the moment and own your own actions without necessarily having to trust the validity of someone else's success. Because often, as Jack was saying, many of these successful people are not nearly as successful as they make themselves out to be.
Well, yeah, that's true as well. Like I had to look up. One of our guys said that it was Elizabeth Holmes, and I wanted to see if it was the same. Yeah, it looks like that. Yeah, I'm trying to find the name of the show that she was on.
Paul Osborne says, so I have the middle skeleton from the Way of Man tattooed on my forearm. I have many tattoos, and I think that as a whole, they are authentic expression. Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you get something tattooed on your arm, or even put a book on your bookshelf behind you, I didn't write the Iliad or the Odyssey. Right. I enjoy the works, and they've become, in a sense, a part of who I am. But I didn't create those. Does that mean my display of the tattoo or the books, or I did do the painting, so that's authentic. But does that make that inauthentic? No, I don't think so at all. I mean,
well, what people would say is inauthentic is if you had the books behind you and you hadn't read any of them.
Oh, yes.
That would be the inauthentic thing. I think having books, having what Ron Burgundy, I have many fine leather-bound books. Like if you had a library of leather-bound books that you had never read, that would be inauthentic.
So if you have a tattoo from the Way of Men on your forearm, but you'd never read it, or you read bits of it, and you're like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. I mostly like the cover art. Without a strong sense of what the meaning behind that is, that would be different. Most of the tattoos I think throughout history were tribal or familial or they're concepts that were not your original creation most of the time. There's nothing inauthentic about that. Now, how many guys have crosses tattooed on their body?
A lot. Well, I mean, there's a
and how many of them are sincere?
I don't know how much of a tangent this is worth going down, because that's actually something I know a lot about. But tattooing, because I was a tattoo artist for a while. So there is a history of tattooing, and a lot of it is copied themes. Whereas you're talking about the tribal stuff, which was Maori stuff and ancient things from corpses that we don't even know why they did it. Like that. But the American style stuff really is a ripoff of the Japanese stuff, because the Japanese had this whole tattoo culture, and then I think a lot of it had to do with World War I and World War II. There was that Polynesian kind of the halfway point. There was a lot of tattooing going on in Hawaii. And also in America, it was a big sailor thing for a long time. You go out to sea, you get a tattoo, whatever, and so that became a Navy thing. And what you would do a lot of time, if you're going to get a tattoo, it was you go in and pick from the book. You're not getting the thing about this is about my feelings and whatever that came later. A lot of these times, these guys would just there's pictures of these old famous tattoo artists who would just have a line of sailors out the door, and they'd be put the stamps on, give them their little tattoo, one of 10 tattoos that they got to pick, and they get their panther with the claws and with the classic one of those things. That was
the pin up on the back or whatever.
Oh yeah. I always say, but that was the one that my pappy got, because he was in the Navy. He's in the Pacific Theater. And my grandma made him get the tattoo bikini on her because she was naked. So when he came back and got married, that lady had to get dressed.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a very, very classic kind of wholesome blue collar American story. But what is Barbarian saying? I can't see shit.
Barbarian saying, I created a house from stone and large timbers that towers over the valley I live over. I'm 1,000 feet higher on a cliff. I poured the foundation and walls by hand. It shames the local men.
Okay.
That's pretty cool.
Cool.
That's kind of the dream for many guys.
For a lot of
not
people,
everyone, but
not mine. But for a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is cool. It's cool. It's cool to do all that kind of stuff.
That was like the conversation in the car in Fight Club where the guy's like, what do you want to do? When one guy wants to build a house, the other guy wants to paint a masterpiece. Yeah. Different dreams, but both cool. And like, I think that's a big part of authenticity is not taking other people's dreams as your own. And so much of marketing is trying to get other people to take your dream as their own. So it's I think that the healthy kinds of social and business and networking relationships are where, you know, we all have our own visions, our own dreams that are symbiotic, that help each other out. But they're not just carbon copies of each other. You haven't lost your own sense of your separation as an individual from the person that you're gaining, you know, from and benefiting.
Yeah.
I probably could have phrased that more clearly, but like, if I'm I don't know, buying a computer from Microsoft or whoever makes computers, they do software. Like they've got their own vision of what they're trying to do across the nation. I'm not like, yeah, I want to spread computers. I was like, no, I have stuff I need to do for work. And this will get that task done. And there can be a functional relationship there, but being captured and turned into a cult follower by the marketing department, which is like if I could pick on one industry in particular, the green energy industry did for a while, although they seem to be losing some of their power in recent years.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, as far as picking on someone else's dream, I mean, I would say that I did that before, and maybe that's a phase people have to go through. I would say the most obvious, people want to fit in. You know, like if you're going to join a group or you're going to be part of something, you do give a little way. You want to fit into the group, but like, what are we doing now? Like, what are we doing? What makes us as part of the group? And so you add pieces of those. Their dream becomes a little bit of your dream, and you have to absorb some of that to really be part of a human group, which is an interesting thing. I mean, I mean, being very individualistic myself, obviously, I am very much in agreement with the idea of like not copying somebody else's dream. But at the same time, like I think of all the times that I've done it in my life, and I try not to do it as much as possible. But we do try to fit in. But I mean, man, obviously when I was, with the Unspeakable group, I mean, like obviously I picked up there. I'm like, because I can take an aesthetic and like run with it. I'm like, okay, this is what we're doing. All right, I'm gonna turn this up to 11. This is how we're gonna do it. Okay, well, I can make this work because that's a talent that I have. So I'm like, okay, well, then bones. Let's do bones. All right, all right. I can grab that and run with it. And the same thing, I would say the funniest thing about the Church of Satan, which is a different group I was a part of, very much tied to the idea of being an individual. But man, you go to a group meeting of people from the Church of Satan, and they all wear black suits and red shirts and black ties. it's like clockwork, like they all have the exact same look, and they like the same movies, and they have the same it's funny because really they're buying into one guy's culture.
But that might be another example of one of those, like, it's really easy to make a stand-up comedy joke about it, but is it actually a contradiction to be a group of individuals? Like, on the words alone, it's easy to mock, but I don't think there's actually anything. There's no contradiction there. Like, of course, we can be a group of individuals, and we share some things and we differ on others. And like you said, there's some give and take, and I don't know if there's a way to give some like clear, pure line where you go from being a mere member and cross over into the domain of an NPC who has like completely, who has become a, maybe another way of saying it is a true believer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, groups of individuals are a little bit like herding cats. The more individualistic the guys are, we have a very individualistic group. I mean, the Order of Fire is pretty individualistic. We have a lot of very different guys. I mean, we all agree on certain, there's like some core stuff that we have to be on the same page on, or you just don't belong to the group. But, like, you know, you're not going to have a good time. But the other things, I mean, we have guys with very different aesthetics and very different, musical tastes, very different backgrounds, very different lifestyles. I mean, my lifestyle, like from day-to-day basis versus yours is pretty different. And the same is true with a lot of different guys that we have in the groups, across the board. So you have a lot of that, but so we don't have the outward individuality. We haven't given up that much. But then, everybody wears those T-shirts and the little symbols and whatever. So, either you're going to be in a cult or not going to be in a cult. Make a decision.
Yeah.
But you have to do it. But I think, there's a room for a lot of other things. So it is a fine line, because as humans, we do have to belong to groups. And that's the thesis of the Way of Men. It's like, you can't really be part of a group unless you give up some of that.
Yeah. Well, and groups, and this is a very like Matthew Crawford point, the constraints of groups give you the framework for development and becoming an individual. It gives you a context within which you can become an individual, because you can't contra Sartre. You can't actually be an individual meaningfully and feel like an individual in the void, like your individuality is experienced in juxtaposition with others. So you actually, again, this is one of those, sounds like a paradox, but there's no contradiction. You need a group in order to become an individual.
Interesting. I feel like I made that argument in Becoming a Barbarian in some
You
way.
probably did.
I'm not sure how much I believe it, but like I said it at the time, because that's when I was becoming part of a group. So I was like,
well, it's still true.
I think. Well, the thing is, improving yourself to a group of other men, you do become a new version of yourself. That is 100% true. I mean, you change with the group to a certain extent, but also like you reveal your own capabilities in your ability to do that. So you become transformed in your own way as well as in the group. So that, I mean, like, obviously, like, okay, our guys who have been in elite military units, they had to basically be in the group. Like, you are only the group. And then eventually, then they come out, they come out, or they get to some high level where they can be weird, which is a lot of them. And and their personality comes out, or then, they get out, and then they're these very different individuals. We were talking about different guys I've talked to who've been SEALs or special forces or whatever, and they're across the board.
Surfer dudes with long hair.
Yeah. Oh, it's just a wild across the board, from total degenerates to like dudes who run $1 million companies. There's like it goes everywhere. But can you read Bronson's comment?
Yes, this is a really, really good one. Bronson says, people often don't mirror the brilliance of others. They mirror their personas, and people burn through one persona after another. That is the best use of the word persona I've heard in print, like, ever. Like, that's the correct use of the word persona, I think.
Yeah. And you can't really look at, I went to use persona in the description, and I had to look it up today. You can't use the word persona without it being a mask. Because that's literally the etymology of it. It comes from like words to use a mask. So it can't be really separated from that. So the idea of using someone else's persona is like you're taking this superficial like skin suit that they're wearing, and because you can't really become them. Like you can't have their struggles, but you can put on what you see. You can try and imitate just what you see, and that is the persona, and that's what he's talking about. I think that's absolutely true. That's why you're waking up at 4 a.m. like thing. Like that's part of what he's saying and doing and whatever. What's your morning routine? That's like my favorite question. Everybody always asks me, what's your morning routine? I don't know. I pound 2 rock stars and get to fucking work. I mean, I try to make myself work while I'm still smart. Yeah, I mean, everybody's different. But what did Taylor say?
Taylor says, my pet peeve is popular phrases or quotes on social media combined with cheap, inauthentic context. Example video of person exercising with caption, everything happens for a reason. I'm cringing just imagining it.
Yes.
And it's cheap to say cringe, because cringe is one of those things that can also be used inauthentically to try to demoralize people. But like I feel like Taylor's touching on what we were kind of talking about before with the, like, there's the inauthenticity that you feel yourself, but then there's like a feeling of inauthenticity, whereas like someone who's just transparently copying someone else is like, that experience is unpleasant. And if you're going to imitate someone else, that's like a learning process, as a phase to go through and transform yourself, by all means, give that a shot. It's maybe worth doing, but bear in mind the cringe you will be imposing on other people around you if you're going to make a big public show of it.
Well, that's everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just going to say in response to his next comment, which I can kind of see from here, is that everybody's becoming an amateur philosopher. And that bugs me, because that's my job. Stop taking my job. I'm an amateur philosopher. like that's my job.
Me too.
Like you're taking my job.
And you're making
Bob
it look crappy.
Fucking, like Bob, who works at whatever Good Guys or whatever. Like, you're taking my job by trying to be an amateur philosopher. I'm going to be out of work.
Yeah. Well, like, this is like, I swear to God, this keeps coming back. I did mean it originally as kind of a joke, but it feels like it becomes more serious every time. The keep philosophy boring line like shows its value once again. It's like, we can if we keep it boring, will it keep the Gen Z broccoli heads from like borrowing paraphrases of bad quotes of Marcus Aurelius one more time? Maybe. We can hope. Brock says, by being an individual within the group and putting the group's needs first, you stand out among the ranks. You become one others aspire to be like. Absolutely. Yes. Like, I'm not to make everything about Homer, but there's 2 truly great warriors on the Greek side, on the Achaean side. There's, of course, Achilles, but the other great warrior that a lot of 18 and 19-year-old men think the Iliad is really about, is the true hero of the story, is not Achilles, but Diomedes. Diomedes has 2 whole books where it's just nothing but him butchering people, and he actually injures 2 gods on the battlefield. So he's like a pretty big character, and they are both excellent warriors on the Greek side, but they differentiate themselves from each other on a detail, which is, how do they respond to criticism? When Achilles is criticized and dishonored, in a sense, by Agamemnon, he stands up for himself and eventually withdraws when Agamemnon refuses to back down. Whereas when Agamemnon chastises Diomedes, like in, I want to say book 5 or book 4, Diomedes' charioteer says, hey, you don't talk to us like we're amateur soldiers, like we don't know what we're doing. Don't talk to us like we're cowards or something. And Diomedes turns to him and says, oh, chill, let him do his king thing. He's riling the people up. Let's get riled up. Let's prove him wrong and like, be good soldiers. And then they do exactly that. So it's like, it's a very different, it's a different response, but within the context of a group and a shared idea, a shared identity, and to a degree, shared ideals. Now they obviously part ways and set by their examples kind of separate ideals for how a soldier should behave, perhaps. Do you stand up for yourself and hold on to your individuality? or do you, as Brock was suggesting, completely submit yourself to the group, and in the extremity of that, sort of like rise up and make yourself the best? And there are arguments to not submit so completely. There are good reasons to not go full Diomedes, but there are also good reasons to do that.
Well, I mean, in the military situation, I mean, that Bronze Age military being probably a little bit different.
Right.
But I mean, in like a modern military, there's, there's definitely, I think, in where that would really ring true is like, well, okay, you're going to be a Navy SEAL or Green Beret or whatever. I'm going to be the best Navy SEAL and the best Green Beret, and that you've accepted the form, and now you're going to inhabit it to become the highest version of the form, and then that's why that becomes very appealing. And you could be well known, like he was the ultimate. And those guys are guys who we know who have been in contact with those guys. They'll look at that and be like, he was the ultimate Marine. Like they'll appreciate that, like you inhabited the form.
The Marine's Marine.
Yeah. Yes. And I didn't want to, and we're going to wrap it up here in a second, because I told Lucio that would be an hour and a half and maybe spaghetti. And so, because I'm like, I'm not done with my cheat day. I want to have more cheat day. But I avoided early on. I laughed to myself and then avoided it because I didn't want to send you down a Homeric rabbit hole. But isn't this all a discussion to the two different kinds of authenticity between Achilles and Odysseus? Because one's talking different ways to whatever, known for being a little more crafty with words, right? That's kind of your argument. And then the other one's more like straight and direct, and this is who I am, and whatever. So Precisely. I was like, I thought that as we talked about, I'm like, that's going to be a half hour if I send Christopher down that hole.
Yeah.
But I wanted to point it out as we were wrapping it up.
Yeah.
Because you really wrote a book about that. So
pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, guys, it's so cool to see all these comments. Yes, The Hero and the Man is his book about that, and that's obviously where I got that comparison from. And maybe it wasn't my own authentic observation, but rather it's Christopher's.
No, it's what I came up from, what I stole from Greg Naj and Leonard Molnar. So
yes. So anyway, I think we're going to wrap it up now. But thank you guys. It's so cool to see this growing and see so many guys up in the chat. It definitely makes it worth doing for us. And I feel like we're getting steam of having a show, which is fun. It's been pretty easy to come up with topics because we both like to talk about similar things. So from different angles. So it's been really cool. Again, any of you guys, I think there's a link in the description, and we have now a Discord for the Order of Fire that you can join for free. You just have to sign up and give us your email address for the future offers and cool stuff and news about this show and all that. And hopefully get more people, and you guys can talk about this and argue with each other about stuff as much as you want in there. Well, until you piss me off, then I'll kick you out. But because I'm the Pope. Anyway, thank you guys for joining us. I really appreciate it. And we will see you all later. But anyway, stay solar.
Stay solar.
Pater is the cultural arm of the Order of Fire. For more, visit PH2T3R.